Hey, Read Through the Word friends. It is August the 7th day into our 8th month of reading through the Bible. Hope you are enjoying it so far. We're getting into Daniel. We started Daniel yesterday. Just a little glimpse of it in the end of our reading. And I wanted to focus on one verse, but it's going to require us to go back to another verse from yesterday's reading. So hang in there with me. There's a lot of points in the lesson today, because my mind just kept, well, not really just my mind, yes, my mind, but also I just kept clicking. And would look at this verse and look at this verse and look at this verse and look at this verse, and it would take me to this question. And so I packed a lot of points in here for the lesson. The key verse is when Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, came to kill them, Daniel handled the situation with wisdom and discretion. So one of my prayers has been for many, many years to be like her, because she was wise. And when I say her and she, I don't mean, I'm thinking of specific people. Not like putting myself down, but there were specific people that I've known, and I'm specifically thinking of when I was younger and I saw these people, or these women, not people, women. I primarily looked at those as role models, as role models. And they were women who, excuse me, I'm going to reach over and get a tissue, girls. Sorry about that. There were women who knew when to speak and knew when not to speak. And when they spoke, they knew exactly what to say. That could silence the room. And I don't mean in a kind of way, in a way that's going to just put somebody in their place, rudely offend them, and walk away smiling. That's not what I'm talking about. These particular women just knew how to silence a room with wise words and wise counsel and wise questions. Not necessarily even how to resolve the issue or solve the problem, but would ask questions that would lead to the discussion of resolution. And I remember always wanting to be one of those people and thinking I had to know a lot of things to be one of these people. Surely these people are, educated to the highest level. Surely these people are well-read. One woman, grew up picking cotton in her childhood. Not educated at all beyond a high school diploma. But yet she knew. And when she walked in a room to join the table, you listened. You listened to her. So I've grown to learn that wisdom is not necessarily being well read. Wisdom is not necessarily being highly educated. wisdom, and I put the definition here, is the quality of being wise. It knows what is right and true, but it's also coupled with the judgment as to action, which would lead us to discernment discretion, which I align with discernment as a spiritual gift, knowing certain things and knowing when to speak and when not to speak, and knowing, kind of having a sixth sense of something. So these kind of hold hand in hand. But discretion is actually a power. It's the power to decide to act according to one's own judgment. The quality of being discreet in reference to one's own speech and action. In other words, it's knowing when to open your mouth and when to keep it shut. And when you're opening your mouth, knowing exactly what to say. So, how did young Daniel know this? How did a young boy, how was he able to have wisdom and discretion? Because I have a son that's 20. He's still considered young to me. But when he was younger, and even to this day, discretion? No. No. Wisdom? No. But this is what I want us to look at. Now, we remember yesterday we talked about, I think it was yesterday, we talked about the fact that God gave them special abilities, and that to interpret dreams, he gave them, the boys, an aptitude for understanding literature and wisdom. But I want us to pop back to Daniel 1, verse 8, because I believe that this is the key. This is the key. 1 verse 8 from yesterday's reading. But Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king. He was determined not to defile themselves. One of the commentaries, this is not, and I think this is in your notes, but this is not my original thought. But Daniel realized that his relationship with God touched every area of his life, including what he ate. So our relationship with God touches everything. And we have to ask ourselves, in our seeking to please God, in our attempt to obey God and do what he has called us to do, in obedience to his word and the prompting of his spirit to obey him, do I consider what I'm doing to myself as the possibility of defiling myself? Am I doing something that is bringing harm to the plan that God has for me later in life? I know that's kind of like mind blown. But and I don't just mean food here. I know that he's talking about food because he didn't have technology, and he didn't have restaurants to go to, and he didn't have huge friend groups, and he was in captivity and that kind of thing. But what if we considered, what are we doing? What are we putting in our bodies? What are we participating in? What are we putting in our minds? What are we participating in that could be defiling the very part of us that God wants to use for his greater glory later? Daniel considered this. It's like, I can't take the risk. I cannot take the risk of messing up, in simplest terms, something that God might want to do in me and through me. And what a way to think about how we live our lives. But he had wisdom and discretion in handling the situation. And that came from knowing God and having a healthy fear of the Lord. Wisdom is a healthy fear of the Lord will bring about wisdom and give you a healthy fear of the Lord. And I put, oh my goodness, did I leave off? I did. Under what about this wisdom that comes from God? Because all wisdom comes from God. So what about it? I believe that's James 1:17. If I forget to go check that when I go back to my notes on the post. What a delicious verse. I mean, we could spend a whole 30 minutes unpacking that verse. But that tells us about it. It's peace-loving. This wisdom is peace-loving. It's gentle at all times. It's willing to yield to others. It's full of mercy, full of good deeds, shows no favoritism, and always sincere. This is the wisdom that comes from above. This is what Daniel had in this moment when he handled this situation. And then how do we get the wisdom? I put a couple verses there. And then went to Proverbs 3 for a last little word about wisdom. So let's think about what we're doing that could possibly defile, destroy, disarm, discredit us in a future plan that God has purposed for us. For right now, what we do, what we say, what we're involved in, who we're involved with, what we're partaking in, will have a ripple effect on everything. And Daniel knew that. Daniel knew that. That's how he could act with discretion and wisdom. Because he had a relationship with God that he was not dare going to jeopardize. So, am I willing to jeopardize my relationship with God and his future greater glory? Because I want to participate in something, or I want to do something? Or am I going to seek him, fear him, so in the moment I can have the wisdom and discretion to handle the situation? See you next time on Read Through the Word.